Hidden magical worlds have been a staple of fantasy since, ever. In Celtic mythology, there's the hidden otherworld of fairies and pixies. In Harry Potter, there's the wizarding community, hidden with a mix of mild elitism and magical memory birds. And since the trailer for Artemis Fowl came out, which I have, feelings on, I've been thinking a lot about how we can build these hidden worlds logically. And I'm very happy and grateful to say that today's video is sponsored by Squarespace, and if you would like the notes for this video, the research that I did for it to take away for yourself, then visit the website that I've built with them. And if you want to build your own, then it would be awesome for you to go to squarespace.com/HelloFutureMe and use the code HelloFutureMe to get 10% off your first purchase. More on them later. We'll be discussing how this world stays hidden, society's basic functions, why it stays hidden, geography and population, and a little, or maybe more than a little, on how it might fit into your narrative. So, firstly, how your hidden society stays hidden from the crocotypes. Secret worlds stay hidden through any number of methods and stories, but when considering your world building, you need to be able to answer A, how do they prevent the mundane world from discovering them, and B, how do they prevent people within the society from revealing themselves? Though we'll get to that second one a little bit later in more detail. The answers to these questions are often closely related to three things in your world building: the type of powers, the level of technology, and appearance. For example, consider the magic system in your story. It's very common for hidden world stories to have a magical enchantment of sorts that either prevents the mundane world from seeing magical monsters or accessing magical areas, or it prevents magical people from going certain places that could expose themselves. This particular strategy is simple but believable world building, especially if there is an historical reason for that enchantment existing. For example, in Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, the mist was created by the goddess of magic with the intention of making magical things and monsters appear normal to humans. It fits logically within the wider mythos. However, one challenge to consider here is that this kind of magical method of hiding works better with a softer magic fantasy story. For example, in H.P. Lovecraft's works, there is a veil of sorts that prevents mortals from seeing the eldritch horror realities of the world. And where this veil comes from is incredibly mysterious, like an ancient power that none truly understand. This fits perfectly within the incredibly soft magic system of the Elder Gods. In contrast, Brentwick's Lightbringer series has an incredibly hard magic system, with clear rules and limits that the reader understands, primarily using colours to give abilities to individuals. See here, using a magical veil in this story would be inconsistent with that magic system. It may come across as not just overly convenient, but it may bring into question the rationale behind magic itself. If your story is dominated by a hard magic system, perhaps consider other methods of concealing your world. A less common, but equally applicable method of hiding is using technology. In Owen Colfer's Artemis Fowl series, the people use superior technology to accomplish the exact same purposes as the magical veil, through the use of force fields, cloaking devices, and time fields. And if you're looking for a more unique take on the Masquerade society, then technology may be one avenue to consider, especially if the magic system does not allow for a magical means of doing so. This is also rare given that usually fantasy series have more bows and arrows and the like. And thirdly, blending in. So, a lot of the time, fantasy stories feature a hidden community of humans or human-like beings like enough to blend in with normal society. In Grimm, the magical beings can look like humans, they can act like humans, and think like humans, meaning that firstly, there isn't the same requirement for that broader magical or technological veil, because individuals can naturally blend in, but more importantly, the individuals within that magical society are more capable of identifying with that normal world culture. In Grimm, that's human culture, as it is often in fantasy stories. To compare this to Artemis Fowl, the green-skinned, dwarfly short, half-horse, winged and sparkly fairies wouldn't blend in, and so they require something more to shield them. And they do not think in the same way as humans and do not easily build relationships with them. It would be hard not to spot them and go, "They got me!" The degree to which your hidden peoples can blend in with normal society can affect your world building in two important ways. Firstly, it doesn't require the heavy magical or technological protection because normals won't as easily identify them. Secondly, the more that they can relate to the normals psychologically and socially, the higher the risk of exposure of the hidden society. Individuals are more likely to build lives and relationships in that normal world, friendships and marrying, increasing the number of situations that require their world to be revealed. This type of hidden world, where they can blend in, may be better if you're looking to write a story with a cast of characters from both worlds, but you're not looking to explore the complex realization and relationship of humanity meeting an essentially alien society for the first time. But what if your hidden world has no magic, no technological advantage, and an inability to blend in? Well, firstly, they're probably going to be discovered, but there is one other technique that some writers use: geography. But this too carries with it some problems. So, for example, to refer to Artemis Fowl again, they have both technology and magic to help them hide, but it's still not enough. So, they built their city, Haven, deep in the Earth's crust so that humanity would never find them. In isolating the hidden world geographically, consider two things. Firstly, how it affects how the hidden society sees the normal society, creating an us versus them mentality and allowing stereotypes of the normals to go unchallenged, usually painting them in a negative light, making them less likely to divulge their existence. So in Artemis Fowl, for example, the people see humans as dumb, cruel, and beneath them, because it's easy to. And that is until Artemis Fowl comes along, although he did lock a theory up in his basement in his first book. So, yeah. And secondly, geographical isolation generally relies on the population not having spread to every corner of the land or planet, which means that hidden worlds tend to be more believable before the age of information, with social media, satellites, mobile phones, and the internet, when detailed information could be spread and verified in an instant, no matter where they are on the disc on the back of 4 elephants on the back of a turtle flying through space. But in world building your hidden society, it can also be important to consider, how does this society deal with those who discover them, or those that let the secret out? Hidden societies commonly use things like memory wipes, like in Men in Black or Harry Potter, or they force the person to move to the hidden world, like in S.M. Stirling's Conquistador, or in darker cases, people are killed if they find out, like in Tim Marquitz's Clandestine Days series.
Or worse, expelled.
See, Hermione's got her priorities right. It doesn't matter how it's accomplished, whether with magic, technology, or else. When considering your world building, what matters is the effect of the strategy. How accessible is it, how quickly can it be administered, and how do others feel about it morally? For example, in Harry Potter, even young wizards can learn to obliviate, and wizards can apparate to the person the moment they're needed to wipe their memories, like they do in The Goblet of Fire. It's virtually undetectable to muggles, and it doesn't greatly harm the person, so people don't mind it being used. It seems just like a minor necessary evil. In contrast, in Kelly Armstrong's The Other World, the character Elena struggles internally and feels it's immoral to kill other people who discover her world without real warning. And this moral ambiguity makes it a lot harder to keep the world secret, because a lot of people would either oppose it or not be able to go through with it themselves. If the technology or magical ability to deal with being discovered is limited to a few, or it's extremely difficult, or it's time consuming, then the likelihood of someone escaping with the knowledge of the hidden world and sharing it increases. Keep this in mind when considering how widespread magical abilities are among the populace, and if immoral means are required to maintain the masquerade, then the risk of discovery heightens as the factions within the hidden world question its use or refuse to use it entirely. But there is one more strategy that is relatively underrated in my opinion, used to keep the hidden world safe: disbelief. Sometimes the best thing to do is to do nothing.
When you do nothing.
Because surprise surprise, humans are remarkably good at ignoring things that they don't want to see or rationalizing them in ways that will keep them sane.
It's Christmas!
The truth might be out there, but can humanity really handle the truth?
They got me!
In Patricia Bregg's Moon Called book, vampires leave those that go public about them alone because it would draw attention to them and nobody believes them anyway, well, except for Fox Mulder types of course. But this is possibly one of the more important points to remember. As a world builder with this masquerade society, you don't need a 100% perfect method of preventing and dealing with discovery. The idea that every single person in the hidden society would keep the secret, even if they have a myriad of reasons to, is ridiculous. There will always be someone who wants to share the secret. The world building just needs to make it rare enough that that happens that the normals don't bat an eye at it. And at times the information does get out, the information is either too rare, too inconsistent, or unprovable. Secondly, society's basic functions. So, believe it or not, a hidden society requires things like industry and economy and politics and connectivity to actually function, all of which become a lot more difficult when you're trying to play a giant game of hide and seek with literally the rest of the entire world. In regards to economy, consider things like scarcity and regulation. Being a hidden world would often make certain resources more scarce, because access to them would be limited by being unable to venture out into the normal world. For example, livestock like cows and sheep need vast open areas of good land to prosper, meaning that a society with little land or underground would find it incredibly difficult to produce a lot of wool, beef and milk. Their main access to it might be through the normal world markets, which carry with it the additional possibility of discovery, making it more expensive. Consider which resources your hidden world has access to, whether with the help of technology, magic or blending in, and how this affects the architecture or the value of certain items. Likewise, how does the government regulate certain magical items to ensure secrecy, prevent them getting out? Unfortunately, I couldn't really find any good examples of world-building hidden societies that take account of their internal economy, meaning this could be one way that you really distinguish your masquerade society. In regards to politics, consider for your world-building A, what secrecy means the government needs to do, B, which government structure best accomplishes that, and C, how related your society is to the normal world. In some stories, the fear of discovery necessitates a large government with extreme surveillance capabilities. This seems to be the case with the Knights Templar in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, who have a recording device in every car and intense profiles on citizens. In other stories, the difficulty in administering the law caused by being secret necessitates a small decentralized government with more power in the hands of local communities, in hopes that they will more efficiently regulate themselves, as it seems to be in stories like the Dresden Files. But perhaps the most important world-building factor here is the relationship between the normal world and the special world. If the special and normal populations live among one another, then it's likely that the political and social trends in the normal world will affect the trends in the hidden one, perhaps trends towards democracy, accountability, fascism, or bureaucracy. However, if your hidden world is separate, perhaps socially or especially geographically, then the way the normal world government works will not as easily affect the hidden one. For example, Harry Potter's Ministry of Magic became more accountable and more democratic during the Enlightenment, alongside the normal world, because wizards live among muggles and thus inherit some of their good ideas. Likewise, the more separate a hidden world, socially and geographically, the more its socio-political discourse will develop at a different rate, either faster or slower or in an entirely different direction. In regards to world-building the society itself, consider how secrecy affects societal structure and values and language. Language naturally changes, and when people become geographically isolated, they will develop accents and then eventually develop different languages or dialects entirely. If its safety is dependent on a select few with the ability to sustain the magical veil, then perhaps they will be an upper class as the most important members of society. Perhaps children are ostracized for socializing with the normals. As with politics, the more separate the people of the hidden world are, either geographically or socially, the more those values, languages, and social structures will evolve independently of one another. Think about the point they diverged. What would they inherit from that point in history, and how would social values change from that point onward? This would be fascinating to explore if, say, the hidden world isolated itself before the Renaissance or the Enlightenment. And thirdly, consider why your hidden world stays hidden. Realistic world building requires a realistic reason that a whole society would undertake a cumbersome, time-intensive, and expensive measure to ensure that they're never found. Most of the time, this boils down to some variant of, "The world is not ready," either because they're a little bit terrified of being murdered by the normal world, or they believe that they're better off without those normies. And this might seem fine at a first glance, but it quickly unravels as realistic world building when you consider the secret world problem. It doesn't really matter how dangerous or how great of a punishment exposing the world would be. If there is something to be gained by exposing it, then people will. This is most commonly a problem with secret world villains who have every motivation to cry, "They got me!" Often they would profit financially from exposing magic or their technology. They might gain notoriety, or they might gain power or influence in social circles. Once again, we must return to Artemis Fowl, the Opal Deception, where the villain wants to spark an interspecies war with humanity. Opal certainly isn't deterred by the thought of, or that, "Oh no, our world would be in danger." The answer being, yeah, that's the point. Some world builders get around to this by making the villain only interested in the hidden world, or at least that they need to control the hidden world before they can go out to the normal world, like Voldemort in Harry Potter. Another real motivation to consider is selflessness in asking, is it ethical to hide the world from the normals? In Black Panther, the state of Wakanda hides its riches, technology, and wisdom that could genuinely help the rest of the world. The antagonist in this film legitimately asks whether they should share it. Tackling this question, though, would make your story a more unique take on the secret world trope, because authors often ignore it. It naturally generates a wider conflict and can dominate the narrative, when they might want to focus on something else. However, one way to avoid this question is to build a narrative conflict that only affects the hidden world, meaning the characters won't have to consider the normal world. This is why the stakes in the Harry Potter series very rarely concern Muggles directly. Umbridge taking over the school would not impact Muggles in any meaningful way immediately, so the characters don't have to consider this ethical question. Even so, if your story does affect the normal world, then it's important to consider how this question fits in with the morality of your characters. When would they reveal the hidden world? And when would they consider it justified to keep the secret? And finally, an individual might just reveal it for personal reasons. They might reveal it for love, or friendship, or research, or simple curiosity, or just kinda 'cause they can. Ultimately, it all comes back to that point from before. The world-building secrecy doesn't need to be perfect. Discovery just needs to be rare enough or strange enough that the normals don't look twice. But playing into the likelihood of these reasons coming up are two important factors: population and geographical isolation. Imagine you have a secret, and you share it with one person. There are only 2 chances in the whole world for it to get out, and the other guy isn't going to share it because he knows that he'll get caught by you. Now, imagine it's 100 people all keeping that one secret. It becomes a lot harder. Not only are there 100 chances for it to be shared, for any of the aforementioned reasons, but there is a low risk in discovery of who shared it first. Now, imagine that on the scale of thousands, if not millions. By that point, it becomes virtually impossible, but being geographically concentrated and having a smaller population does increase the likelihood of keeping that secret. For example, in the Trollhunters Netflix series, there aren't millions or even tens of thousands of trolls. Their population is relatively limited, and they're mostly concentrated to a single underground city. This makes the secret a lot easier to keep. This is because geographical concentration and a smaller population means that there are fewer chances that it will get out, and it makes it a lot easier to track down the perpetrator, reinforcing that motivation to stay secret, and it prevents individuals from integrating into the normal society. They won't as commonly marry or become really good friends with those in the normal world. So it can feel unrealistic to have large and spread out hidden societies. But a concentrated, close-knit one might just work. And finally, how the hidden society might fit into your narrative. So the hidden world trope has always been incredibly popular. Urban fantasy these days has something of an obsession with it. Young, plucky hero/heroine is an ordinary human until they realize they're not. They discover the hidden magical world that only they can save because reasons. Dramatic love triangle ensues. And there's a good reason that people like it. The idea that there's this hidden, fantastical world just adjacent to our own, hidden in the forests, underground, in the Empire State Building, or through a magical veil, that the ordinary person can find is enticing. It's easy for the reader to place themselves in the story, to believe the world is out there, because it's often grounded in our world. Harry Potter begins in the mundane backstreets of Surrey. Sunnydale and Buffy the Vampire Slayer is a generic familiar California town. And it's because of this underlying aim for many authors in using hidden worlds to easily ground the reader in their world, that hidden world stories are often accompanied by 3 narrative points. 1, the hidden world is set alongside the contemporary human world that we know. 2, the protagonist is a human who discovers this world near the beginning of the story, and 3, the story regularly gives recognizable things a second magical meaning. In Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, the story is set in the early 2000s, the hidden Greek myth world is centered around the United States, and its protagonist, Percy, is at the age the average reader would be, and they know nothing of this world. But he discovers it in the first chapter, as the reader does, and the story makes the Empire State Building, a recognizable mundane thing, a magical landmark as the entrance to Olympus. But the problem is, there's no real reason you need to use these 3 tropes in writing a hidden society story. You could have a hidden world based in the far future or ancient history like Assassin's Creed, you could have a character already immersed in the hidden world like in DC Comics' Constantine, or base the hidden world on an alien planet with nothing familiar to our own. I would love to see a story where the normals aren't just humans. Constructing your hidden world narrative to so heavily rely on those 3 tropes can lead to your story feeling unoriginal and stale because of how often they have been used. There are plenty of other creative ways to accomplish exactly the same thing that can distinguish your story as unique. And if you know that there is a secret hidden magical world out there like Crocker, then do what every logical person does and put it on a website with flashy colours, Illuminati pyramids, and a title like "The Truth is Out There" with Squarespace, the perfect place to put your conspiracy about the demon pixies who live in your pumpkins. I've actually got a website of my own, timhicksonyt.com, where you will find the notes and research for this script for you to take away if you are so inclined. Squarespace is cheap and it's easy to use because, well, I managed to do it, and it's all in one platform without plugins or updates ever. It's flexible for you if you're a writer, a world builder, or a conspiracy theorist. Whatever you dream of being. You think that the chickens are secretly building a plane to escape the farm? Put it on a Squarespace website. And it's even easier with 10% off your first purchase with my link. Go to squarespace.com/hellofutureme or click the link in the description to start building your own website. That is squarespace.com/hellofutureme and get started today. Link down in the description. So what have we discussed today? Firstly, consider the means of hiding. A magical means usually works best when it fits logically within your magic system. The more your hidden peoples can blend in, the less they will need extreme magical technological hiding strategies, and the higher the risk of exposure as they build relationships in the normal world. Secondly, consider the means of cover-up. The less accessible, the more difficult, and the more morally grey the method is, the harder it will be to use it to sustain the masquerade. Disbelief is also an underrated factor. However, it doesn't need to be foolproof. Discovery just needs to be rare enough to be dismissible. Thirdly, consider how secrecy will affect resource supply and government regulation. Secrecy may demand centralized or decentralized power depending on the challenges that society faces, and the more separate it is, the more distinct its political setup will be from the normal world. Consider when it became secret. How does this divergence change societal morals or social structure? Fourthly, the secret world problem is that it doesn't matter how dangerous revealing the world is. If there is something to be gained, people will. You could aim at minimizing this problem or tackling the genuine ethical questions, but it would be unrealistic world building to ignore it entirely. And it's because of this that if you are wholly concerned with purely realistic and logical world building, a hidden world story may not be the way to go. Fifthly, the smaller a hidden world is, and the more geographically isolated and close-knit it is, the lower the risk of discovery, with fewer chances for it to get out, the higher the risk of it being caught, and the less they will integrate with normal society. Sixthly, hidden world stories are often accompanied by the 3 tropes, but there is no requirement to use these. Though they may help connect the reader to the story, the characters, and the world, relying too heavily on them can feel unoriginal. But that is all from me. My question to you is, what distinguishes your hidden world story? What makes it different from all of the other ones that we've read before? Let me know down in the comments below. In the meantime, I would love for you to come follow me over on Twitter, Facebook, email me stuff you made in the address and links in the description below. Love you all, stay nerdy, and I will see you in the future.